Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of It's Not You, It's Grief. My name is Ahira Smith, and I am the Grief Mending Coach. Thank you all so much for joining me on a very special episode. Today, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of having a national acclaimed speaker, motivator, coach, trainer. This woman is just dynamic because she is able to take her gifts and help people be successful by creating a culture that's very innovative and supportive regarding folks' aspirations. So whether it's on a professional level, whether it's personal, doesn't matter the industry, whether it's technology, athleticism, college, university, this woman here is just dynamic because she is on a mission to support others be great in their role and in their purpose. And today we are talking about a very, very sensitive, tough subject. So I want to let it be known first and foremost that this is an episode that could be very triggering to listeners. So please be gentle with yourself. If anything that we talk about resonates with you to the point where it's very uncomfortable, we want to make sure that you seek some assistance, support regarding the matter at hand. But nonetheless, regardless of what may happen, we just want you to know that you are safe, you matter, and that there is definitely a ton of support out there for you. But back to my guest, I'm just so excited because I had the pleasure of meeting this woman several months ago through LinkedIn, and we have been able to exchange dialogues and talk about the professional world and what it's like for women of our caliber who are here to support each other and to help others as well. So without further ado, I'd like you all to meet my special guest, Miss Elaine Pasqua. Hi,
Thank
Miss
you,
Elaine.
Ahira. Pleasure to be with you. I'm so glad you found me on LinkedIn.
Yes, thank you as well. Thank
Wonderful.
you as well. So let's get into it. This month is April, and we are going to be talking about sexual assault awareness that unfortunately happens every single day. Some of the statistics that I recently was made aware of that unfortunately every 68 seconds, an American in this country is sexually assaulted. That's
Yes.
frightening. That is frightening that every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. And what's even much more disheartening to hear is that every 9 minutes, a victim that is sexually assaulted happens to be a child.
Mm, mm.
It's startling. It is startling. And, even I mean, the statistics just get worse and worse. None of this is good. And on average, over 460,000 people over the age of 12 and older, are victims of rape and sexual assault. These conversations we need to have up front. We can no longer afford to have these conversations in the back. And I know that a lot of victims, unfortunately, might have experienced some sort of sexual harassment, even in the workplace, which is one of the things I definitely want to talk about because there's a pattern of sorts. It starts off as being dismissive, but then when it becomes aggressive, we end up with these different types of statistics. And I just want like to talk with you, Miss Elaine, regarding your experience regarding the field itself, and what you have been able to overcome, and be where you are right now. So I definitely want to turn the floor to you to just be able to share some light, exactly what it is that you would like to my audience to know.
Thank you. This has been a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think that many of us don't realize how many of us are survivors. And after this is not political, but this is just was a trigger for me and for thousands of people across this country, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And when I listened to the hearings that day, I was down in Florida. I was speaking at the University of Tampa. And I was so angry as I was listening to it. And the next day, I sat on the plane, I pulled out my computer, and I typed a list into my laptop of how many times I had been chased down the street by a group of guys fearing for my life, stalked in cities where it was really overt and frightening. I was sexually assaulted on an elevator in Rome. I was slipped a date rape drug in Philadelphia. I was raped at a party, because when I had a little bit too much to drink and I just couldn't fight it off. And there were 14 different incidences where I felt threatened. And I can honestly say that most of the women of my generation have experienced this. And I can also honestly say that a lot of men also experience it. And you mentioned pedophilia. I worked with a military installation in the Northeast. And after I was done training their leaders, there were 25 people in that training. And after the training was done, I was sitting in the room with 4 men. 3 out of the 4 men shared with me that they had been sexually molested or assaulted as young children or teenagers. A lot of it happens in teenagers. And it's usually men on men and usually men on women more statistically, but also men can be victims as well. Women can be perpetrators also. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have about respect and boundaries and open communication. So and there was a study that was done years ago up at UMass Boston, Dr. David Lissack, and he interviewed 1,800 college men about their sexual past and their sexual practices. And he concluded that it was 6 to 10% of the men are sexual offenders, and 1/4 of them are serial offenders. By the time they got into college, they had already been engaged in what we would consider 6 different sexual offenses. So I like to flip that and let's go to the positive. So if you have 90 to 94 or 6 to 10% of the men who are sexual offenders, that means that 90 to 94% of them are upstanding and they have the integrity to do the right thing. And so I'm very careful when I speak and do my programs. I don't attack the men because oftentimes we hear that. And when you attack them, they're just going to fold their arms and they're just going to just count you out. They don't want to listen, and I don't blame them. And I've had so many come up to me and say, thank you for not doing that. It's a refreshing approach. And I invite them to become part of the solution instead of blaming them. And I want them, the peer education, um, peer feedback is so influential. And I want them to call other people out when they see sexist behavior, when they hear sexist language, when they see anything that's derogatory sexually towards another person. When you call them out on that, you take the power away from them, because sexual violence is not an issue of somebody being horny, but it's an issue of somebody wanting to gain power and control over another individual. So when you call them out on that, you take that power away from them and you're more likely to change that behavior.
Thank you for sharing.
That's a lot.
It's,
To digest.
I'm processing, but that's okay though, because we need to have these conversations. One of the things I'm curious about, you just mentioned the fact that, for those men who were identified as, unfortunately being sexual offenders based off what was done unto them. I'm curious to see whether or not there is some information out there about the women who may also be sexual offenders as well, based on what they have encountered. Because again, if only there's a small percentage of men who will admit that, versus where it's women, it's clearly in the 90s. I'm curious to know if have you had any conversations with women who have shared that they had sexual offenses against them based on what was done to them?
That they have been sexual offenders
Yeah.
themselves.
Yes.
I have not, to be honest with you. Um,
Okay.
I do know of one story where a friend of mine, and it's technically considered rape, where she was in a ladies' room and a woman came in and pushed her up against the wall and
Hmm.
put her fingers and down in her pants and up into her vagina, which is technically
Wow.
considered by legally rape.
Right.
And it was
Yeah.
very, very traumatic for her. So I do know of that story, but I honestly have not heard of other stories like that. I mean, I've heard of some men who have shared, I was drunk and this woman climbed on top of me and she did
Right.
this to me and I wasn't really aware of that, but I don't honestly have any statistics.
Okay. Okay. But that I would really I'd find that interesting to see if anybody, if women have, if there's something out there, and I probably will look into that later on for
Yeah,
this month,
we could probably
being
Google
what
it.
it is.
Yeah,
Definitely Google it.
the
So,
rain
but
might
back,
even have something.
yeah, I definitely will check out the RAINN website regarding that. But back to you though, regarding all that you had encountered. You said 14 different incidences taking place in your lifetime where you felt threatened or that you had experienced some type of violent act against you. How how did you go? How did do you, well, first of all, do you recall at the time, how old you were when you had your first encounter with that type of sexual harassment? Again, harassment and assault are two different things, but do you recall the ages in which, or the
No,
age range where that might have happened, where it
it
was
can go
like,
back as early as middle school.
wow.
You know, of kids in the neighborhood, you're playing, I mean, I just remember playing hide and seek and you're hiding behind somebody's chimney. I grew up 15 miles outside of New York City in the suburbs. The houses were 20 feet apart. So we had
Hmm.
everybody would come together at night and we would play hide and seek. And you know, your home base is on the street corner and you're hiding at different places. And I would
Hmm.
go hide and all of a sudden a boy would come with me and before I know it, he's trying to grope me and feel me up, so to speak, you know, and you're young. And back then, because I'm older, we didn't have conversations about this. And so we weren't trained to speak up for ourselves. We would just sort of freeze. And then the incident in with being chased down the street by a group of car full of guys, that was in high school and it was dark out and I was walking home with my friend. And you learn, you get your street smarts and you learn if they're in cars, you run through the backyards and you just go and get through, weave your way through backyards so you can try to lose them. And hopefully they're not going to get out of the car and chase you. And even though nothing happened in the end, it stays with you. It's the PTSD that so many survivors have, and it sticks with us. That incident in the elevator in Rome has stuck with me for years. And this was back in the 80s that it happened. And my boyfriend at the time and I were staying in a pension, and we were up on the 5th floor. And we were there for a week. And when it came time to move out, we had everything that we had to bring back down to the car. So he went down with a load of things, and I thought, well, I'm not just going to sit here. You know, I'm a taskmaster. So I went and grabbed a load of things and I got on the elevator. And just as the elevator doors were closing, the owner of the pension hopped on. He just squeezed right through and he immediately grabbed my face. He's trying to stick his tongue down my throat. And I had an armful of things. Some things were fragile. I didn't want to drop them, but I'm stuck in a box on a cable with this guy and I had no place to go. And he's like trying to, you know, get at me and his tongue is in my mouth and stuff. And of course, I grew up in New Jersey, so our language is quite foul. So I immediately went to my F-bombs and all my Jersey girl language and I was screaming at him. And the only thing I could think to do was to turn around and put my face in the corner of the elevator so he couldn't get at me. And then he's going, no love, like. And it's like, what are you doing? You know, and I didn't even tell, we got down to the ground level and my boyfriend was there at the car. I didn't even tell him because I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to get out of there. And I was afraid that if I said something, that it could get really ugly. And my boyfriend was not that kind of guy, but still, you just don't know how it could have triggered him. I just wanted to get away. But I can say, in terms of it sticking with you, to this day, every single time I get on an elevator, I spoke at a conference in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania the other day for 2 days. Every time I get on an elevator and a man steps on with me, I cringe. I cringe. It just triggers. It doesn't stop me from doing it. I have to push past it, but I also feel extremely vulnerable um, because I know what can happen. And if there are any gentlemen listening, if you ever see a woman that is not holding the elevator door for you, please understand that we're just not comfortable sometimes going up with a male stranger. Because if a guy's coming, I just let that door close. I don't open it
Mm,
or hold it for them.
you know
All from
what?
that one incident.
That 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 speaks volumes because I never thought about that, but now that you're mentioning it, that is disturbing. I mean, because even just hearing that, I can see, we could see why some women may be clutching their purses to their chest when when a guy is coming there, because they might have been attacked out on the street, and being, like you said, being in such close quarters with a stranger, you don't know what's going on in people's mindset. So
No,
did
people don't share, and I have a lot of friends who've been assaulted at knife point, and I've I have 3 friends that I can just immediately pull up that have had very, very traumatic stories.
mm,
One gang raped with at knife point, another one being assaulted in Philly at knife point, and then another one who had moved out to Phoenix, who had been, assaulted coming out of her car. And so it's these random assaults that make us lose our comfort in moving around in public, and it sticks with you. There's a lot of research that's done on PTSD for survivors of sexual violence. A lot of times during the incident itself, the survivor might have an out-of-body experience just to detach from what's happening to get through the experience. And sometimes people are puzzled by why a survivor can't always recall details or might change the story. And the reason that happens is because that disassociation, that out of body experience, so they can just get through it.
so I'm curious, with you looking back with all that you had gone through, especially with that incident in Italy, if you knew then what you know now, do you think you would have told your boyfriend about what happened?
Probably, yeah, because he deserved it. And again, women in my generation was like, oh, guys are guys, they can be pigs, and you
Right,
just sort of you went along with it. You were harassed at work, you were groped in public places. I had an incident yes, I should have told him. I had an incident in Maryland of at Annapolis, the Annapolis Boat Show. Same boyfriend. And we were at the Annapolis Boat Show with 2 other gentlemen, and and these men were very, very successful, very classy. And here comes Jersey Elaine. We're coming into the show,
mm,
and there was a guy who was at the entrance who was giving us stickers that would show that we paid. And
mhm.
he took the sticker and he stuck it right in the middle of my nipple. And I was so appalled, and my Jersey girl set in, and I ripped it off my nipple, and I said, "You pig!" And I stuck it right on his crotch. And the 3 men that were with me were like, "Whoa, that was impressive. I can't believe you did that." And of course, the guy didn't get the message because I wanted him to get the message to feel how
Right,
humiliating it was. And he was like, come back, do it," and it was just like, well, he was never going to be the kind that would get it because he did that in the first place. He didn't have
right.
respect for people.
Oh my gosh, that's
I
just so
know.
disgusting.
It
That's
is
r-
disgusting. It's just
rude, crude. It's just there's no excuse for that type of behavior whatsoever. So
not at all.
I'm
Not
so
at all.
sorry you had to go through that. That's just so disturbing. So
It's all right. It just, you know, you go through it, you push through it.
my goodness. So with that being said, you talked about some of the PTSD that you had experienced because of the incidences. Have you has the PTSD been lessening? Have you been able to kinda minimize the PTSD? Or, like you said, if you're going on an elevator and something triggers, do you feel like it's right back up there, that same height as it was before? Like, how do you work through that type of PTSD? Because that's a type of grief that does occur. So I'm curious to know
Right.
exactly with you with regarding that.
I never consider people choose to move through their traumatic experiences in different ways. And some people hold on to it or and let it paralyze them. And then other people move through it. I've always considered myself to be one that moved through it because it never stops me. I still get on elevators. I do have my high alert moments. I'm always on high alert.
Hmm.
And I think that's what it does. But I'm a woman. I only weigh 105 pounds and I'm 5 foot. I just learned I shrunk. I'm 5'2" now. And it doesn't stop me from traveling all over the country by myself. I mean, there were years before COVID where I was flying 65 flights a year. And I'm going into hotel parking lots by myself at night. I am going into the parking garage at the Philadelphia airport where there's homeless people sleeping, when I'm returning home. And I go, but I also know when to reach out to somebody to maybe escort me because I see something that sends up the alarm and says, this may not be good. Do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. The elevator, I still always feel the little twinge of discomfort, but it's never stopped me from getting on an elevator. I still get on, I still travel. So I think PTSD would be more or some people, it could be more severe where they don't even feel comfortable moving around in public or maybe stepping on an elevator after an incident like that has happened. So I've
Hmm.
healed, but yet there's still this twinge of discomfort that's there. I guess that's the best way to explain it.
No, and it was perfect explanation. I appreciate that. Do you feel that the women of your generation are still withholding that information, or do you, because of the times that we're living in right now, and a few years ago we had the Me Too movement, do you feel that women of your generation are starting to open up about these types of situations as far as sexual assault or harassment is concerned, or do you still feel like they're closed off?
I'd say, I don't know, I can't say if it's 50-50, but I could say more came out during Me Too and more men understood it. I have a friend who is a brilliant guy. He was a physician, very sensitive in a same-sex relationship. And after Me Too, I started to share some of my experiences. And he looked at me and he said, I never realized it was that pervasive. And I think a lot of people did not realize how often it happened. And once you start sharing your story, it was amazing once I started sharing some of my stories, how many of my friends who I did not realize some of the things that they had been through started to share with them. My sister was sitting was driving on a backcountry road and she was, this guy kind of stopped her and said he needed directions. And then all of a sudden, before she knew it, he's grabbing onto her hair and giving her instructions of how to stop the car and get out of the car and do this. And she had to make this split-second decision as to how she was going to handle this situation. And she chose to gun the gas and get out, to try to get away. But it's so many friends of mine have stories to share that are, yeah.
Wow. Wow,
So,
that is
and
so.
younger women, and I'll share this too, because I've done a lot of work in speaking, especially at colleges and universities, and working for the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, talking about sexual assault prevention and awareness. And so many survivors reach out to me, mostly female, but male survivors reach out to me as well. And one of the things that surprises me is that even though we're educating people and we're talking about it as much as we are now, it's still happening. And it seems like so many college women, I feel like they're almost at the same place that the women of my generation were at, where so many of them have a story too.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. With
you
my
find that too?
my previous work working at the colleges and universities, they are, it's unfortunately more prevalent. And it's disturbing because of the simple fact that with all this information out there, with all of the access that people have in the palm of their hand, of course we can do everything just by texting, nowadays people are still choosing to do this type of behavior, knowing that, okay, I can take a picture of you or I can record what you're doing, is wrong. And yet people still engage in that type of behavior. And that's so disturbing. It really, really is.
Well, a lot of it is we have to look at our culture on a whole, and this country was built on classism, racism, and sexism. And women were always looked at as lovers or wives or not equal to men. And we have been fighting to be looked at as equal. We're still making 84 cents on the dollar for every dollar that men are making. And there's many, how many, what did I read? There's 27, is it 27 no, that's wrong. 27% of our representation in Congress is female, but yet we comprise 50.4% of the population. So we're a little bit more than the majority, but we're not
Right.
getting the same representation. And so we have to look at our culture, our music, our the way that boys have been raised in this country. Sometimes it can be multi-generational, just like domestic violence is multi-generational. People model what they see. And so that's why we all need to get involved to talk to people about what is the correct way, the proper way to talk to people and respect people and to get consent. People don't even know about consent. They don't even know what the difference between rape and sexual assault is. And so there's so many things that we need to be bringing to the table.
Agreed. Agreed. Regarding the workspace, I'm sure you have talked to numerous people about the different types of sexual harassment that they have encountered.
Mm.
Do you feel that those like in HR or those who are in positions to provide services, do you feel like that is being taken more on a serious level, or do you feel it's still kind of stagnant as far as sexual harassment is concerned, based off what you have observed, especially talking to the professional sports and that of the colleges and universities? Do you feel like there is a a change when it comes to addressing the sexual harassments that are taking place?
All right, let me do the workplace first, because we'll
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
business and corporate, then I'll go to the
yeah,
sports and then
yeah,
colleges. So in terms of
absolutely.
businesses, um, sometimes what happens is you will see the hot topic of the day. And you had the Me Too movement, that whole thing, and that's the scandal that started all that in Hollywood and all these things. And then people become reactionary. Oh, we got to bring this into the office. Or you see a big lawsuit and then reactionary, and everybody wants to do that. Now, some organizations are more proactive and they bring it preventively and they do bring these issues forward, but it doesn't always happen. I've had a couple different incidents where people wanted to hire me to come into their corporation or company to do a sexual harassment program. And then I get on the phone with them and they suddenly shift it and go, no, we want to do workplace harassment. And that's different than sexual harassment, because sexual harassment, you're delving more into the nuances of this, the pornographic things that somebody might be showing a friend or talking to somebody about their sexual liaisons over the weekend, or having to hear jokes, or the physical harassment, the verbal, the visual, all those things that come in. So then they kind of water it down and they kind of take it away from that. So different organizations are a little bit more um, proactive and preventive about bringing this topic through. In terms of the sports world, I've worked with 32 teams now across the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. And it is mandated by those leagues. I haven't worked with soccer and hockey, but I'm almost positive they do it as well. And it is our athletes are role models. They represent their franchise, their city, all the people that have mentored them along the way. And we want them to be remembered for their performance out there on the field or on the court, and not their indiscretions off. And it's a very challenging thing for these young men, because they come in and they're suddenly in this world with abundance of money, a lot of attention. I mean, they got a lot of attention prior to that, playing their respective sport, leading up to getting into a major league or whatever. And but there's a lot of temptations because a lot of times there's a lot of young women that throw themselves at these guys and they try to entrap them because they see them coming and they think, cha-ching, I want to ride on the coattails of success, or I want the bragging rights that I had sex with this guy, or even sometimes they get entrapped into pregnancies too. And this is something that I learned from working with a number of the Major League Football teams where they were sharing the team psychologists were talking about sharing these incidents with them. So we're trying to get these guys to think here, not think with their crotch, and to think about the different scenarios that they're getting involved in, and how life altering one night can be for them. And we want them to be respectful too. So it's not just about entrapment, but it's about them being role models and respecting women, asking for consent, knowing what the difference between coercion, consent, and incapacitation. And I delve into all of this with them and teaching them these things. And they're confused. I've sat with teams and sometimes I get in trouble because my program goes longer because these guys start firing questions. And it's always but the what if scenarios, and but what about, but this person did this and did, and they're trying to work their way through it. And I'm just saying, look, if you don't know them all that well, walk away because you don't know who this person is. You don't know what you could be opening yourself up to in terms of vulnerability. So that's, the leagues believe that this is an important topic. I just worked with the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Texas Rangers 2 weeks ago they always cover domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault. And I do the three of them in those trainings with these players, with the minor league players is who I work with. And then in terms of colleges, it's the most underreported crime on college campuses today. It's a sexual assault. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 16 men will become a survivor of sexual violence. 1 in 5 women, did I say? Did I say 1 in 3? 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men will become a survivor of sexual violence at some point during their college career. And what people don't understand, we often think of sexual violence as like the bad person jumping out of bushes and attacking them. But what they don't realize, in 98% of the cases, it's an acquaintance scenario where the person knows the perpetrator. And in 90% of the cases, one or both of the people are under the influence of alcohol. And so and I said 98, my statistics are coming out wrong today, 80% of the cases. So of that it's an acquaintance scenario. And so what we want them to understand is that the alcohol interferes with our ability to assess the situation. I talk about what safe drinking looks like, how alcohol shuts the brain down, our ability to read social cues, our ability to follow our instincts, our emotions, all these things come in when we're shutting down the prefrontal cortex first, as we're flooding alcohol into the brain. And I want them to understand that they need to have the open communication, bystander intervention, look out for one another, because the number one weapon of a sexual offender is alcohol. They're feeding the person drinks. They're trying to get them wasted so they can then take them out of the social situation and then assault that individual. I want people to look for that scenario, give them pointers on how they can safely break that up. So there's all these different conversations that we can have, but I have talked to so many survivors from college campuses who no longer feel safe. Some have said, I can't relax in a social setting because I don't know who I can trust. Some have shared with me, I don't trust my friends because they left me in a vulnerable situation when I was drunk and I was raped that night. Or I want to be able to trust the opposite sex again. Or I tried to act normal, or I didn't realize what happened to me was considered rape. All these different things that come through the conversations and the letters that I receive from some of the survivors on campuses.
Wow. That that's heavy. And again, I commend you for the work and the conversations that you're having with these students and with these professional athletes because again, they do tend to occur more so with because of the athletes because of the light that's shine upon them, and even on the college campuses because of the fact that they're in college, these are supposed to be the best years of your life, and you're experiencing all these different people from all over the world, and again, you just do not know, and that I know for me, I had a situation on my college campus, and this was in the 90s, and even just hearing this, it's like, it's still going on to this degree. And even at the time, I didn't think of it as what it was as far as sexual assault. But when I talked to the lawyer that time, because yes, I did press charges and everything, they're like, you were sexually assaulted. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so, the level or the different areas within what is considered sexual assault, it's like it is expanded like an accordion. It's like, oh, it's not just this, it's this. And I think if we continue to have these conversations, especially with the men, they'll be more cognizant of the behavior, and women too, because it's not just the rape itself. It's other things that can lead up to that. So I think it's important that we definitely have these conversations, and obviously it's unfortunate that the younger that you start having these conversations, like you said, something happened to you in middle school, in today's day and age, when you start having these conversations in middle school, hopefully by the time that they do go to college or they're out in the professional world, it's already been ingrained in their mind. It's like, okay, don't do that. Watch out for this person. Just be more aware of your surroundings and taking note of the social cues that are out there.
Right.
So it's
Well,
just,
the thing that I think is important and what I do, I'm a storyteller. In fact, I just found out that I'm going to the final, a semi-final round in storytelling for National Speakers Association. So I
oh,
got to do that now. I'm like,
congratulations.
yay, I'm so excited. And actually, that story is about a scary moment going into the Philadelphia airport garage at night after midnight, and a homeless man being there, and what all ensued from that of me going to get help and whatnot. And but I share stories. Many have I actually have a Word document of all the letters and stories that people have written to me about um their incidents and their traumas and their assaults. And with their permission, I share pieces of their stories anonymously. And the reason that I do that is that I want the audience to understand what an event like this can do to somebody's life. And if we don't share that, then I want this to be a deterrent. And it's like, look, this sticks with a person for a long time. And I think when they understand that, maybe, maybe they will be less likely to want to perpetrate that to another individual and realize how traumatic it is for somebody, how life altering it can be. I mean, a lot, especially college campuses, sometimes you see students dropping out because they no longer feel safe there. And when you have an acquaintance scenario, when it's a stranger rape, you don't often see the perpetrator again. But when you have an acquaintance scenario, that person could be sitting in the same class with you. You could be passing them every day across the quad, and you have to experience that trauma again of seeing that person.
Great. Agreed. This has been so enlightening, and in a good way, but also in a very sad way because of the topic in hand. One of the things I am really curious about, just again, based off the conversations that you've had with the victims, and also those who are the offenders, has there been any mention regarding how their faith has either helped them deal with the crime or the situation at hand, or whether they have released it altogether because of what has taken place? I'm curious to see if anybody has ever talked with you, or even that of your own experience in terms of how much your faith has played into your healing or your recovery, if you
What
will.
comes to me is a story of a student from a campus up in New England, and she went to Catholic high school, and she went to a Catholic university. Drop dead gorgeous, absolutely beautiful, and she was a virgin. And she came home on her Thanksgiving break, and her birthday was that weekend, and all her friends were there, and they thought, hey, it's the birthday girl, give her shots, get her drunk. And they did. And they're giving her the shots, and she remembers sitting at the kitchen table feeling really, really wasted. And this guy who'd been trying to get in her pants all through high school and was never able to succeed took her down the basement and he raped her. And she wanted her first time to be in a loving, committed, healthy relationship. And it shook her to the core with her faith. And now feeling like, because of my faith, I wanted to be a virgin all my life. Now I'm not. And questioning all of that, about her virginity, her faith in Catholicism and everything. And so that's one that comes to me more. I do have other people that have said their faith helped them work through it. And not as many people mentioning faith in general, generally just mentioning their stories about it.
Understandable, understandable. So I definitely appreciate you just sharing light on all that you have not only gone through personally, but professionally in terms of working with other people, navigating through their own type of grief and loss, and shedding some clarity, if you will, to help them get back to living in the present moment, which is what I am about, as well as the work that I do. If there was any additional advice or support that you can share with those who may be having some difficult time right now, whether the incident recently took place or they're still traumatized by the incident that it might have happened years ago, what would you like to say?
You can't heal when you hold
Mm.
secrets.
Mm,
Talking is one of the most healing things we can do, whether it's with a friend who you trust, but you've got to be careful. And I'll just throw this in here too. It's very important when somebody comes to an individual and tells them that they've been raped or sexually assaulted, that you listen with an open heart and an open mind and not be judgmental and not say, oh, well, that was just a drunken hookup or, or whatever. I'm going to kick that person's rear end for doing that to you. You just listen. And because the way a person decides to move forward after this traumatic experience is often predicated upon the first conversation that they have with the person that they talk to. And the first person they generally talk to is the person that they trust the most. And so if you listen with an open heart and open mind, that person will be more inclined to seek help and you guide them to seeking help. Now, that's an aside. Now, for those of you who have been traumatized, talk to people and get professional counseling. You can talk to RAINN, call other sexual assault support groups to help move forward through this process. It can take some time, but we want people to get the help that they need. We want you to be able to heal. We want you to be able to love again freely and to be able to trust and not have any of this hold you back. Because I've talked to too many survivors who have said, because I was forced to do this in another relationship, it's really affected how I can open up to my present partner. And we want to be able to clear ourselves from those past hurts. A rapist or a sexual offender, when they win, when their trauma continues to go, to stick with a person. So if you can move past that, you're the one who wins in the end, and you can move forward in your life with healthy relationships.
agreed. Agreed. Miss Elaine, thank you so much for just taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about this really heavy topic. This is not easy for anybody, whether they're sharing their story or even being on the receiving end of listening it, because again, we just don't know who has gone through it. I know for me, and just the work that not only the work that I've done, but helping other people, but even my own growth and healing of my own traumas. It's, it's still enlightening because the fact it reminds me that I'm not by myself, that there is support out there. And that's the one thing that we want to make sure that shows like these conversations continue on, because we're not by ourselves, and it's unfortunate that these things are still going on to this day at alarming rates. But we have to keep this conversation in the forefront. No longer should it be hidden in the back. No longer should not be talked about because it's just a normal thing. There's nothing, this should not be made normal. This should not be
No.
made normal
And
at all.
parents should be talking to their children. Children, it starts early, 4 years old. What is
Mm,
healthy touch? What is not healthy
right.
touch? Giving a child, if the child doesn't want to go over and sit on that uncle's lap, let them
There's a
have
reason.
that. Yeah, yeah, and let them be able to advocate for themselves and say, I don't want to do that, because if you allow them to advocate for themselves, they're going to be more inclined to advocate for themselves later on. And
Agree.
also another thing too, fathers, talk to your daughters about very sensitive subjects, because we find that most of those conversations happen between the mothers and their children. But when we find that the fathers get involved with their daughters and they talk to them about, you know, it like, are you having cramps today? Do you want me to go get you something? Can I help you? And
Yeah,
then talk to them about healthy relationships. Those girls tend to hold a higher standard for
agreed.
themselves and their expectations. So that's crucial. The male conversation is very, very important.
Agreed, agreed. From me being that of a daddy's girl, my father and I had a close relationship where he talked with me, about stuff like that. And it made me be like, oh, okay. So the fact that a man asked a young lady going through all this stuff, it's okay, because as you said, those kind of conversations usually take place, or supposed to take place between mothers and daughters. But then again, not all daughters and mothers have a good relationship. So you want to make sure it's somebody that you know and you trust. And I was very fortunate to where my dad did have these kind of conversations with me. And we just need to have them. We just need to have them, period. People who care about each other, who are not uncomfortable or afraid to talk about stuff like this, that makes us a little bit much more inclined to bring our walls down just a little bit. We may not be able to get rid of all of our walls because we still have to make sure we are still attentive of our safety measures, but it just makes us a little less fearful. So,
You're lucky. You were lucky that you had a father that was engaging like that. And I was
oh,
too. I was
yeah,
too.
listen, he taught me how to fight. I grew up in a household full of men, so he was going to talk to me on how to defend myself, and he was also going to tell me it's a New Yorker thing. So he taught me how to defend myself and how I need to be mindful and everything. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate you for all the work that you
Thank
continue to
you,
do with
Ahana.
talking to everybody. This has been so enlightening. I'd love to make sure we have another different conversation down the road about
I would
this,
love
but
it. I'm
it's
honored.
it's been a pleasure. So for
Thank
those
you.
of you, thank you. For those of you who were able to sit through this whole conversation, I appreciate each and every one of you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to this really important conversation. And again, if there has been anything that we can leave with you, is just to make sure to remind you that you are safe and that you matter and that there is much support out there. Uh, Please know that there will be information regarding how to contact the RAINN organization and other sexual assault prevention organizations out there to help you should you wonder where to go if you're not comfortable. We definitely want this out there. We definitely want you to feel safe and supportive. And if anything, just know that it will heal.
There's a
It will
lot of
heal. It
people.
will
And
get
if
better.
anybody wants to contact me to come in and do any programming for them, you can reach me on my website, elaine@elainepasqua.com.
Absolutely. And
I'm
that
happy to help
information
you.
will be shared as well. So again, thank you everybody for joining me on another episode of It's Not You, It's Grief. Please stay well, stay intentional, and most importantly, just stay safe. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.